us on this webinar. This webinar will be about one of our research briefs that we've completed here at Invert Strategies in 2026. Before I get into the webinar or the brief, I want to introduce myself. My name is Darren Greenfield. I am the founder and lead strategist here at Invert Strategies. I'll tell you a little bit more about what we do at Invert if this is your first time engaging us or seeing any kind of material from us. We would really love to learn more about you and your organization, or you as a leader, or just as an individual who is walking through trying to give your best value to the world in life. Well, today in this brief, what we will be talking about is what we title here at Invert. We haven't created this title, it's been used before, but the frozen labor market, how a low hire, low fire economy is quietly reshaping Black America. What is this briefing about? This briefing is a briefing on opportunity, mobility, and the racial economics of a stalled recovery, and what the next 5 years demand, not only of Black men, Black women, but mostly of the institutions that train them and care for them. So who are we at Invert Strategies? We want to give you an introduction. At Invert, we help leaders, organizations, and individuals get perspective before they plan. You know, we've realized in our work that most people we come across, most teams, most companies, they don't lack ambition. What they do lack is a clear view of where they actually stand and how they want to get to where they're going. So that's where we start. We believe that before genius can be experienced, clarity must be established. Who do we work with? Number one, we work with organizations. We do that through team intensive, multi-day intensives that produce a strategic, operational, and financial plan. The team actually builds this plan themselves with our facilitators in the room, giving them clarity. We always say that our facilitators are the process and the teams are the content. This is why the teams we work with actually execute on a strategic plan, because they had so much of their hands and their minds building it. We do one-on-one intensives, which is the same work that is turned inward. We surface your story, your design, and your purpose. Then we build a plan across every domain of your life, not just the one that pays you. And so we want to look at every nook and cranny, every domain of your life. We do counseling. We do our counseling in person or over Zoom. We walk with people, with leaders, with anybody who is carrying grief, anxiety, anger, burnout, shame, marriage and family conflict, and are working through patterns that for some reason they just cannot get them to break, whether that's individually, as a couple, or as a family. And then we do group intensive with industries, group intensive with different kind of fields, whether it be a school district, medical cohorts, whatever the group you can think about, we do it. That's when we get a room full of people working the same ground together over several sessions that can happen in a day or a weekend or several weeks. It is the collective version of what we may do in our individual work. Now, I know you saw one up there that may look very unique to you, and that is counseling. And so one of the questions that we love to answer is why we handle both the business and the person. You see, most firms pick a lane, and we think that some of them are very wise in doing that. We would never tell them to stop doing that. But we do not think that the organization and the person carrying the organization or people working in the organization are two clients. We see them as one. A plan is only as durable as the leader who is executing it, and a leader is only as steady as what they're carrying home or how they show up at home or what's going on at home. And so we kind of delve into both because we want that leader to be solid in their own personal space, because in our studies and our facilitation and our deep work with individuals, we found out that more of the personal life actually oozes into the professional life and ruins more. And then sometimes the professional life, a lot of the times, is crossing the boundaries with the personal life and that professional cannot show up well. So we handle both. Sometimes for the same people. Sometimes we have a person come in our professional tracks and they end up going to our personal tracks, or our personal tracks to our professional tracks. Sometimes the organization gets planned. Sometimes the leader gets cared for, and it's often both for us. What we deliver is clarity in everything we do, the kind of clarity that leads to effectiveness, growth, and a life and organization that holds together in a thriving pace and thriving quality. All right. Now that you know who we are, let's get to what we are talking about today. What does this brief answer? This brief that we're going through, it gives us the full picture of what a frozen labor market is and why it cuts deepest along racial lines, especially African American and Black lines within the United States. It's also going to give us the answer to why many of us are seeing it, but we can't name it, why we are feeling a gendered recession. We're going to talk about how the freeze splits Black men and Black women in opposite directions, not only in their career paths, but in their life paths. We're going to talk about a quiet exit. That's going to be our third stop. Why Black workers are leaving the labor force and where they are going. We're going to look at historical mirrors, the economy. We're going to compare it from pre-civil rights and civil rights eras to what's happening now. And then we're going to look at a training blueprint. We're going to talk about all these issues, these problems, and these observations, but then we're going to end with solution-oriented conversations, how to prepare Black men and Black women for the next decade. All right, let's jump in. Here's the first observation that we need to know, and it's pretty much the executive summary of this whole briefing. A lot of us believe that the economy is crashing. Well, at least right now where we stand statistically, the economy isn't crashing in itself. What's crashing is opportunity. Opportunity is crashing. Opportunity is going away. Why? Because the United States is no longer in expansion, but it is not quite in a recession either. Economists call it a low hire, low fire market. Companies are not laying off workers, but they aren't hiring workers either. The headline numbers look stable from where we sit a lot of the times, but the reality underneath those headline numbers are not stable at all. So what are some of those numbers showing us? What we're seeing right now is a 2-time Black to white employment ratio. This has been a persistent pattern for 40 years, and I want us to hear that, because no matter what we've tried and what we've done, I think some of these things have been very brilliant. I think some of them could use some work, but no matter what it is, we have not closed that Black to white unemployment gap in 40 years. We have a 6.3, close to 7 now, in some statistics, unemployment gap for African Americans versus a 3.6% unemployment rate for white Americans. And this statistic was pulled in July of 2026. 36% of fewer callbacks for Black candidates when it comes to jobs and recruiting and them trying to apply for vacant positions. The meta-analysis of 28 field experiences gives us this number, and the gap has not narrowed. Watch this. Quillian tells us this in a 2017 article, and the statistics still hold up. The gap has not narrowed since 1989. So a lot of us have been thinking that things have been getting wildly better. They are not. Then the last thing that we are going to see is that African Americans are last hired and rarely rehired. The traditional first fired, last to be hired pattern is now compounded by us being in a hiring freeze in this frozen economy. Okay, so we realize we're not in a recession. We're not in an expansion. We're in a freeze. In a classic recession, we see layoffs spike and unemployment climbs. In a healthy expansion, we understand that hiring grows and workers churn upward. But this 2026 economy is doing neither. It is stuck in a third state, and that state has its own distinct geometry of harm. What's not happening? Massive layoffs. Headline unemployment holds at 4.1%. Quit rates are extremely low. That means workers are staying put. The story looks stable in monthly job reports. Employed workers are largely insulated from the problems that we are talking about. What is happening? We're seeing a hiring collapse. Job openings have fallen sharply. Hiring rates are near a decade low. Entry level pipelines have collapsed first. That means it's harder to get in to places at an entry level. What does that mean for our college students coming out of college or people re-entering or entering into the workforce? And career mobility has slowed sharply. The defining equation is this. We have a hiring slowdown is greater than our layoff growth. The headline numbers are telling you the truth on a macro level, but they are lying to you about the underlying market on a micro level. Unemployment looks moderate, but the dials that actually predict opportunity, hiring, opening, quits, have frozen since the 2022 peak. Black unemployment remains nearly 2 times the white rate. So I want you to take a few seconds. I'm not going to explain the whole bar graph, but you can look over the bar graph. We have far fewer job openings. Hiring has slowed down. Workers have stopped switching career industries or jobs. The Black rate of unemployment stays elevated, and overall rate of unemployment stays elevated. So what's in this gap? Why is this headline misleading? Whatever is in the gap is going to tell us why this headline is misleading. It's misleading because overall unemployment captures only people who recently lost work. It misses workers who can't find a first job, who stop looking, or who are stuck because nothing better is hiring. Black unemployment captures most of these, and it has risen while the headline stays flat. 3 forces concentrate the damage on Black workers. Number 1, there's a pipeline contraction. There's reduced white collar entry. Strategy, tech, media, consulting, DEI, and junior analyst tracks are freezing first. These are the same pipelines that Black professionals only recently gained access to after the 2020 diversity push. The second force that we see is that there is high discretion hiring, which means that there is great bias amplification. Scarcity makes hiring more subjective. People are looking more for culture fits, referrals, and pedigree dominate who is actually getting hired. The largest meta-analysis of hiring discrimination, we talked about this earlier, Quillian in the 2017 study found that Black applicants received 36% fewer callbacks than equally qualified white applicants. And like I stated earlier, that gap has not narrowed since 1989. And then we're looking at mobility loss. We have frozen mobility. Hot markets let workers leapfrog. When you're in a hot market, you can be at a junior position. If you show some initiative and some competency and some capability, you can leapfrog into a senior position. That's not happening anymore. What frozen markets do is they reward incumbents, Black professionals who are underrepresented in senior leadership, rely more on external moves to advance. They say, well, if I'm not valued here and I can't get up the ladder in this place, somebody else will value me more out there. Let me go to the external market to advance. So the stalling actually hits them harder. Now we're looking at where these mechanics of harm actually hit. We want to look at the damage, how it stacks by career level. Every tier and every career level is affected. We know that for sure. But the deepest harm is concentrating itself at entry level employment, where pipelines have collapsed entirely. And we're going to talk about building pipelines a little bit further in the PowerPoint. Executive and senior leadership has moderate impact. The pipelines narrow, the ladders shorten. People are less likely to face unemployment, but there is a large DEI rollback, leadership development cuts, and consolidation of the executive roles are quietly shrinking the path to the top. That means people are doing more on the level that they are on. People are being trained less to get out of the level that they are currently at to go up to levels above them. And there's a DEI rollback. So diversity is not coming through the door as much as it used to. For mid-level professionals, they are in a high impact area when it comes to this freeze because they are stalled, their positions are consolidated, and they're doing more for less. What do we mean? Promotions are stalled. People aren't receiving promotions anymore because there's nowhere to go. Lateral moves are frozen. They can't even move into lateral moves that get them into a department where they can climb the ladder a little faster or learn some other skills to make them look like a more qualified candidate for positions above them. The lateral movement is frozen. HR, recruiting, DI, communications, and middle management roles have begun to get consolidated. You're doing all of that. There is no just HR and recruiting. HR is taking recruiting. There is no just DI, communications, and middle management. All of this stuff is being consolidated. We also are seeing that search times for positions and roles are lengthening and advancement is quietly being halted. Here is where we see severe impact. Executive and senior leadership, moderate impact. Mid-level professionals, high impact. Entry-level and early career professionals, severe impact. They are being hit the hardest. Why? Because if they are not in the door is closing in their faces. How is it closing in their faces? A junior hiring is being cut first. We don't need anybody else. We're going to do the work with what we have. People need experience, a great level of experience. I mean, one of the things that we do at Invert is we look at some of the job recs that are being put out on the marketplace when we are trying to brief some of our clients who are looking to hire on what they should and what they should not do. And one of the things that we are realizing is the extensive amount of experience that people are asking for roles that are either entry level or are still within the entry level salary band. We see that recent Black graduates and Gen Z workers face a bottleneck because incumbents will not move, outsiders cannot enter. People have to work longer because America is more expensive. And so since the incumbents are not moving on, either into senior leadership or out to other companies who are growing and expanding, that means that there is a bottleneck and outsiders cannot enter. And a large demographic of those outsiders are entry-level employees and workers. Here we go. This is the big one. Black youth unemployment remains sharply elevated. And that is a problem for many different reasons. Some of them we will get into. Others, if you want to hear more about it, reach out to us at Invert. We're looking over some research and some studies to actually work through some of the challenges that we see in that market. All right, section number 2. Let's talk about this gendered recession. We are in the same economic freeze, but Black men and Black women are feeling this differently. They have different fractures. Black men and Black women are experiencing the freeze in fundamentally different ways. One of them is losing their floor. The other one is losing their ceiling. Let's talk about this. Black men and Black women face different versions of the freeze. Black men are losing the floor. Construction, manufacturing, logistics, and warehousing, the historical floor for Black male employment, have been hit by automation pressure and slowing capital spend. I can't build if people don't invest. I can't manufacture if the investment is not coming in. And so what happens is, and then we talk about AI, which is a whole nother thing. So Black men have the highest exposure to industries that are automating the fastest. They have the sharpest rise in long-term unemployment durations. They are most likely to fully exit the labor force altogether. Black men are most likely to quit. You see why we're doing some things on the counseling side? Because there are some personal indicators and internal factors linked to that statistic. And we want to help Black men work through that on the personal side so we can help them achieve greater on the professional side. And Black men are disproportionately funneled into gig and contract work. I was just on a call with an amazing HR professional earlier today, and she was wondering, why am I seeing so many Black men into the gig and the contract work economy and not in the career or the trade fields? This is the reason why Black men are losing their floor in the economy. All right, let's talk about Black women. They are losing their ceiling. Black women were overrepresented in the white collar pipelines that grew after 2020. Where are some of the areas that they were overrepresented? DEI, HR, recruiting, communications, project management. Those are where they were overrepresented, and those are the pipelines that are being hit first. Black women are hardest hit by DEI program rollbacks and corporate cuts. Black women have the sharpest slowdown in promotions and lateral moves. Black women are carrying heavier student debt loads into this frozen market, and Black women are more likely to stay in the labor force, but they will be underemployed. So what's the net effect of this gender split and this gendered recession? Here it is. Black men disappear from the data because they're leaving the labor market altogether, or their jobs are being eliminated, so they disappear from the data. Black women appear in the data, but they are stuck in the data. That's what we're realizing. Here we talk about how we want to shape the divide and how the freeze has a gendered fingerprint. Black men and Black women experience the same labor market through different exposures to industry, to occupation, and to expectation. The pattern below that you see in this illustration reflects directional severity. So we're talking about directional severity. And if a Black man is going in this direction, here is the severity the labor market presents to his pathway. A Black woman is going in another direction. Here's the severity the labor market presents in her direction. So here we are, Black men. Let's talk about losing the floor. Long-term unemployment, they can't find work. That is heavy exposure. They are exposed heavily there. Labor force exit, they get discouraged. They lose confidence. They say, I'm taking my hat out of the ring. They stop looking. Black men have heavy exposure there. Underemployment, Black men working below skill level. This is another one that we see about them exiting the labor market. They've gone and gotten the degree. They've become the professional. They have a family they have to provide for, or financial goals they want to go after. And we are telling them, you need to take a job that will underemploy you. They have moderate exposure there. And a big part of that moderate exposure is a lot of them are just staying put at the level, or some of them are saying, I don't know how willing I am to do that. We got to work on the pride thing there. Rightfully so. They have the pride of what they've accomplished educationally or in their career, but they have gone down the ladder. And so they're not as underemployed as they are unemployed. Promotion stalling, they have moderate exposure there of having no advancement, and DEI role cuts. I think this is a very interesting statistic when we talk about DEI. Black men have lighter exposure in DEI role cuts because they were never a part, mainly they were never a big part, let's say that, of the DEI access that opened up after the 2020 push. It was more Black women. Black women are losing their ceiling. So what does their pathway look like? Long-term unemployment, moderate exposure they have there. They are employed. Labor force exit. I don't care what you say. Black women ain't quitting their job. That's what we see right there. They are not exiting the labor force. Underemployment, they have heavy exposure because they're getting stuck in certain positions. Promotion stalling, they have heavy exposure. DEI role cuts, they have heavy exposure. So you can see black men and black women are feeling this market freeze in two different ways. So imagine if a black man and a black woman are in a relationship, they're partnered, they're married, and they're having this conversation about work. And they say to one another, you just don't understand. The statistics are telling us that unless they are getting into one another's worldview, that is actually the truth. This is why we also handle a large part of counseling with couples at Invert, because their profession is showing up in their living room, at their budget table, in their refrigerator, in their kids' livelihood and childhoods more than you think. So if we read this pattern right, black men are heaviest on the left side. They're jobless and they have a labor force exit. Black women are heaviest on the right side. They have stalled promotions and they are going through a lot of DEI cuts. Neither group is winning. Each of them are losing differently. And we'll talk more about what this means about the black family and why black men and black women do not need to be in competition with each other about what they do in the marketplace, that we are realizing that them finding one another and building something together is the best scenario. Let's keep moving. All right, let's talk about the quiet exit. Where are black workers going? When the door closes, people don't disappear. They redirect themselves. We are seeing 5 visible patterns are emerging in how black men and black women are leaving traditional unemployment. So we're going to track where they're going in this third section. 5 places black workers are going when the door closes. A labor force exit is rarely permanent unemployment. It is a redirection into either entrepreneurship, gig work, school, caregiving, or out of the formal economy entirely. Each path has different consequences for wealth, security, and long-term opportunity. The first place that we see people going is entrepreneurship. Both people are going here, but it is heavily concentrated among black women. Black women have launched small businesses at record rates. But the problem we have with that is they are often undercapitalized. The risk of them launching a business is really real. There's real risk there, but it builds equity for them rather than wages. So they may take a hit on wages, but if they're building something really necessary, we tell our clients, if you're going to go into entrepreneurship, you either need to do something really necessary or something really, really special. Do not get stuck in between. A lot of people in the businesses that they are looking at starting, they get stuck in between of building something really necessary or something that people are telling you is really special. So that's the first place they're going. Entrepreneurship. The second place they're going is the gig and creator economy, which is heavier among black men. They're going in the ride share, delivery, the trades that are on demand, content creation, online coaching. The income for these things presents itself to be real. It has real income, but benefits, stability, and the ladders are not. So if you get in there and you make a splash, income is real. But healthcare for your family, healthcare for yourself, stability in this economy. We're seeing a lot of these economies, the gig and creator economy, dry up. So there's not a lot of stability there. And the ladders to climb in that economy are not there. The third place people are going is back to school. This is concentrated among black women. Notice entrepreneurship says both, but concentrated among black women. The gig economy says both, but heavier among black men. The back to school economy just says black women. It's concentrated among black women. It doesn't mean that black men are not going, but we have greater research statistics that say black women are going at such a higher rate than black men that they don't even make it in the statistical category to show up as both. We see this education happening in graduate degrees, certifications, getting a second bachelor's degree, and they are betting on them having higher credentials breaks the freeze. They believing that getting higher credentials actually breaks the freeze. Though debt, them going back to school and piling on debt is actually compounding the risk. So what we are seeing is there is higher risk and higher reward in entrepreneurship because you don't come in with as much debt, but with entrepreneurship, you're not getting as much front up income, but you're building equity if there's something that you're building that is really necessary or really special. The fourth thing we're seeing is that they're going into caregiving and household. This is concentrated among Black women. They're doing unpaid labor, taking care of their children, aging parents, and extended family. This right here, even though they're still working, it is not counted as them being in the labor force, but they are involved in full-time work. So imagine having full-time work that is not only physical, but is heavily emotional, that has a lot at stake with it. You're caring for your children, maybe you're educating them, you're keeping them home because daycare and affording that is out of reach. You're taking care of your aging parents, your extended family, but you're not getting paid. What does that do to a Black woman in her stress level? And then the last one that they're going to is the informal economy, or they're withdrawing completely. That is concentrated among Black men. One of the next studies that we are going to do, a research study, is going to be titled, Why Are Black Men Quitting? Because you notice this, Black men are not going back to school. Black men are highest in the statistics of withdrawal from the work economy. Black men have lower percentages of entrepreneurship. They are heavy in the gig, in the creator economy, but that slows up. So we're asking, why are Black men quitting? And we're also trying to get our bearing around what is going on with Black men. If there is something going on, we haven't looked at it yet. When it comes to long range vision casting, we're looking at that. So cash work, family business, or full disconnection from formal job seeking. This right here is the most invisible exit and the most dangerous long-term exit that we are seeing out of everything we are talking about. Black men and their relationship with the workforce, their relationship with entrepreneurship, their relationship with education is at a very, very sensitive and dangerous place if they are not off somewhere finding the solution to repair the harm of this exit. So that's a very dangerous place for Black men to be. All right, here is what the data misses. And I talked about it a little earlier in our last two slides, but the data is missing the discouragement. Workers stop believing that opportunity exists. That belief, more than any single layoff, is what compounds inequality across generations. There's no place out there for us to offer value. Nobody wants to give me an opportunity. I can't find a job today. I couldn't find one last month. I'm not going to be able to find one next month or the years to come. We're seeing this discouragement, and it's coming in the form, we talked about this labor force exit. Workers stop searching and stop being counted. Career downgrading, roles below skill level become the new normal. Gig substitution, stable jobs replaced by piecework with no benefits, and wealth compression. Lower cushions, fewer safety nets, faster pressure is what we're seeing. This is the compounding cost. The discouragement is one of the things that we are missing. How do we speak to that discouragement? How do we not allow Black men and Black women to get stuck there? We don't want anybody stuck there. But remember, we're looking at the labor market and what it is positioning and what messaging it is sending and how it's positioning the Black life. Why? Because you know the old saying, when America gets a cold, Black America gets the flu or pneumonia. And that turns out to be very true. All right, section 4. What we're realizing is this isn't new. It is a return to somewhere. And where we are returning to may actually shock a lot of you who are a part of this webinar, who are part of this session. The 2026 freeze rhymes. It rhymes with history before. It uncomfortably rhymes with 2 earlier American labor regimes: the pre-civil rights economy of exclusion and the civil rights economy of contested access. All right, how the 2026 economy mirrors earlier American regimes. So when we look at the pre-civil rights economy, pre-1964, we call this the era of exclusion. The mechanism that they used to exclude Black people from the labor market was a legal mechanism and then just a explicit racial mechanism. Black workers were locked out by law, by custom, and union rules. Hiring discrimination was open and it was enforceable. Black workers were confined to low-wage agriculture, domestic, and manual service work. Black men did sharecropping, manual labor, and then they participated in the Great Migration into northern factory work. Black women worked in domestic service, agricultural labor, and were nearly totally excluded from white collar work. That's what we saw in the pre-civil rights era, what we title the era of exclusion. What we see in the civil rights era, the era of contested access, is that the mechanism was legal openings. Title VII, open corporate doors. Affirmative action expanded pipelines. There were real gains to follow from these doors opening, but persistent gaps, ceilings, and first in, first out cycles remained. So what are those? We saw persistent gaps. We saw persistent ceilings that a person only could get this far. We saw that people, the first ones in, when it came to these openings, were also the first ones fired, no matter whether it was about merit, if they did anything wrong. And then we see that this cycle was a cycle that was in the era of exclusion, and it remained. Even when people were finding work in the era of exclusion, if a white person came and wanted their job, or if something happened that made people think of the superiority of whiteness and the so-called inferiority of Blackness, people's livelihoods were taken from them. And we see that some of these cycles remained in the civil rights area. Black men had their entry into manufacturing, government, and skilled trades. They were vulnerable to the deindustrialization shocks. When deindustrialization happened, Black men were very vulnerable to the shock of what that meant showing up at the bank account, at the dinner table, and at home. Black women, this is where we see a large entry into teaching, nursing, healthcare, and government. This is where we see the building of the Black class through public sector work. That was the civil rights era. It was the era of contested access, but we were winning those contested battles through legal wins, and those doors were opening. Now we're in the frozen era. Watch what era this era matches the most. The pre-civil rights era was the era of exclusion. The frozen era is the era of quiet. The mechanism is that people who are in charge of hiring, firing, promoting, or who are starting their businesses, the discretion is currently on them on who gets hired and who gets fired. The laws remain on the books that we won in the era of contested access, but the enforcement of the laws are hollow. DEI rollback removed all the scaffolding that we built in these pipelines to get to certain places. Culture fit is now the new terminology for if you are qualified. So you can be underqualified intellectually. You can be underqualified experience-wise, But if I am hiring you, and this works both ways, if I am hiring you and I think that you are a culture fit, 9 times out of 10 to who I am as a leader, you will get the job over every other qualified individual out there. And 9 times out of 10, what people don't realize is culture fit means many times. We're seeing this with the EEOC. We're seeing that a lot as invert. Many times it means if you will come and be a willing participant, a cheerleader, or somebody who turns a blind eye to my toxic leadership and corruption from my leadership position, then you are a culture fit. Or if you hate who I hate, you like who I like, or you love how I love or who I love. We're seeing that coming out in the statistics in workplace. Referral networks and culture fits are replacing the explicit rules on how we should hire. HR and qualifications are saying you should hire in this manner, but referral networks and culture fit are overriding those rules. Why? Because even though the law remains, the enforcement of the law is hollow. The exclusion of people from this economy is procedural, not legal, and harder to challenge. Here's one of the things that we're looking at Invert. This is a problem, not only because the exclusion is procedural and not legal and harder to challenge, because even if somebody wanted to make the legal challenge, they cannot because they cannot afford to. They can't afford. Employment lawyers from the beginning of your employment situation to the end are ranging on an average to be $30,000. What worker in the economy do you know has $30,000 of disposable income to spend on legal strategy, and they don't even know if they are going to win? And then after the legal strategy, if they are staying in the same market, the same industry, the same city, they're wondering if fighting will get them blackballed. This era, the frozen era, is actually more connected and looks more similar to the pre-civil rights era of employment opportunity and the lack of employment opportunity than it does the civil rights era. So when that means we have taken a large step back. Black men are squeezed in this frozen era by automation in trades and manufacturing, and they are quietly exiting the labor force. Our strategic planning that we do with our companies, we say if you start seeing something over and over again, that means the cream is rising to the top. These statistics are telling us over and over again that Black men are leaving the labor force. These statistics are telling us over and over again. Here we go about Black women. Black women that were pulled into white collar pipelines after 2020 have been the first cut when the budgets have tightened. So they got their dream job they worked so hard for. They were seen as talented, as qualified. They were put into the C-suite or the senior VP's office, and now they are back and many times are underemployed. Pre-1964, civil rights exclusion was written into law. You could see it, you could name it, but you could not sue. Civil rights era, 1964 to 2008, exclusion was negotiated through policy. Gains were real, but we saw them being easily reversed. Each generation had to defend the gains, and we saw that from 1964 to 2008. From 2000, we have what we call at Invert a sugar high. In 2020, in the DEI sugar high, we saw that exclusion was hidden, right? People were saying, man, we don't want to be seen as being part of the bad guy in 2020, so we're going to do whatever we need to do to make sure, even though we still believe the same thing, we don't want to operate like we believe the same thing. Let's give out some jobs. Exclusion is hidden now inside of discretion. There's no statute to overturn. There's no quota to challenge. They can leave you jobless by just saying, we didn't find the right fit. And we didn't find the right fit 9 times out of 10 is either I feel like you don't like who I like, you don't hate who I hate, you don't love who I love, or you don't love how I love. What we're seeing in this 2026 freeze is exclusion's most efficient form yet. Why? It doesn't require anyone to be a villain. It is just now working in an automated fashion. If nobody is there to challenge me to say, I said they're not the right fit, and I don't have to explain to you why they're not the right fit. I'm not the villain. I didn't do anything racist to them. I could give the job to whoever I want. There's no villain. There's no villain that we can actually hold accountable. And that is what is making the 2026 freeze the most efficient form of the freeze, of all of the freezes, and the most efficient form of a labor market freeze that we've seen yet for Black Americans. All right, let's talk about a training blueprint because we're still in the beginning of this freeze. But this freeze is about to become a blizzard sweeping through our lives. You cannot train your way out of a discriminatory system. They made us believe that we can do it. They made us believe that being 10 times better would get us where we needed to be. And for some of us that worked, for some of us that seriously did not work or it backfired, giving us all kinds of mental health conditions, all kinds of issues. We can talk about that at a later time. You cannot train your way out of a discriminatory system, but can train strategically to compound the advantages the freeze cannot remove. Let me say that again. You cannot train your way out of a discriminatory system, especially one, let's go back, where exclusion is hidden in discretion. But you can train strategically to compound advantages that the freezes cannot remove. What does training that compounds look like in a frozen market? Here are 4 principles. 4 orientations every training program for Black men and women should adopt now. These are designed to build leverage where the freeze is the weakest. We want to go from credentials to leverage. So what's the first thing that we want to do? We want to build skills, not job titles. The freeze punishes those waiting for the right opening. It rewards those who can convert capability into income across many channels, whether that be contracts, freelance opportunities, equity, services, teach skill stacking, not career laddering. Number 2, we want to go from contacts to sponsorship. We want to own the network. In high discretion markets, referrals dominate. Black professionals historically have shallower elite networks. Training must include deliberate network architecture, sponsorship, peer cohorts, alumni engineering, and it cannot be soft networking events. Soft networking events are over. We are talking about network architecture now, not soft networking. So we want to go from contacts to sponsorship. We want to own the network. The third thing we want to do, I put my head down because this is hard for some of us Black people. We want to build wealth before status. A frozen market punishes wage dependence. Teach the math of equity, ownership, real estate, small business cash flow, and capital formation. A modest business compounding for a decade beats a stalled corporate title. That's the third one we want to go. We want to go from salary to assets on that one. The fourth one, we want to go from generalist to specialist. We want to train for the technology that's hiring. We want to look at AI. We want to look at applied data. We want to look at healthcare tech, energy transition, and skilled trades adjacent to electrification are where capital is flowing. These are the sectors where the freeze has not yet reached and where capability still beats credential. So we want to go from credentials to leverage, build skills, not job titles, from contacts to sponsorship, own the network, from salary to assets, build wealth before status, from generalist to specialist, train for the technology that's hiring. All right. What the work looks like for Black men and Black women. Remember, Black men and Black women are on separate paths. They're at separate levels. So even though the principles are universal, the programs must be tailored. There's different exposures to the freeze, so it demands different starting points. For Black men, what we want to do is we want to pull them back into the formal economy. How do we want to do that? We want to start with high wage trade pathways, HVAC, electrical, solar, EV charging install, industrial automation. These are the ones that are hiring now and are resisting automation. We want to look at small business and contracting. We want to transition them from gig work into licensed, scaled, credit-bearing operations. We want to move them from earning to owning. Then, in order to do that, in order to get these first two, we have to have re-engagement programs for men who have exited the labor force. In order to get them re-engaged, we need to rebuild their skills. We need to rebuild their mental health. We need to help build and rebuild their financial literacy. We need to help construct and reconstruct how they see their identity and their connection. And we need to do it all in one program, because we can't have it so scattered that they're missing steps or they have different people speaking into them, and one stage is effective and the next stage is ineffective. We need to do that work. For Black women, we need to convert their credentials into capital. We need to have equity literacy and business mechanics. We do that by converting record rate business formation into finance, scaled, profitable companies. We need to stop trading their hours, since they're highly credentialed, for solo income. We need to build some stuff up underneath them and give them the money to keep on building. We need to train them in AI fluency for white collar survival. We need to do this for women in HR, communications, operations, project management. They need to become the person who deploys the AI inside the organization and not the one who is displaced by it. Third, we need to have some sponsorship engineering. We need to have, mentorship gives advice. Sponsorship gives access. We need to train women to identify, cultivate, and convert sponsors into decision-making power. That's what we need to do. Here's our closing. The freeze is the message. The economy isn't crashing, opportunity is. And that distinction between a market that hurts everyone and a market that hurts quietly is the entire battlefield for Black America from 2026 forward until the research shows us something different. So what is our task ahead? We need to build for leverage, not for openings. We need to train for ownership, not employment. We need to engineer networks deliberately and measure success in compounded capital, all kinds of capital, financial capital, social capital, and political capital. This does not need to be measured in titles in a frozen market that refuses to grant anything for those titles. Thank you so much for joining us for this webinar. We will have a Q&A session. I'm going to take that offline for recording, so your questions and answers will not be recorded by us for the webinar, but if you want them recorded by you, feel free to please do that. We do have someone in the chat that is keeping track of questions, because some of you might have great ideas. If you are watching this webinar after, please feel free to put your questions on the questionnaire that we will have for you. and then we will move forward from there. We appreciate you for joining us and believing in the work that we do here at Invert Strategies. If you want to reach me and learn more about Invert Strategies, to retain us, to come out and do any kind of workshop, to work with you and your company, to work with a regional program or project that you are overseeing, please feel free to reach out to me at Darren, Darren, at Invert Strategies, INVERTSTRATEGIES.org. And we would love to serve you and have you as a client of ours. We hope that this was very helpful and impactful for you. And we hope that these statistics and solutions will help you thrive in your next step to being an active part of closing this gap that we are seeing from the freeze. We'll see you on our next research briefing. Have an amazing, amazing day, amazing rest of the week, and we wish you the best.